meditation and investigation. So I've had many conversations with my husband about my path of PTSD. I've had it for 20 years, and in that time, at least half of that time, I believed what my PTSD told me. I believed all of those nasty, negative, dark thoughts, and it was controlling the function of my brain. And it was making me operate from all of those stress chemicals 24 hours a day. So where I am now, on the second half of that 20 years, I have been able to come to a place where I question what comes up, because I've been able to build new neural pathways in the brain through many different tools. Okay, I always say it's never just going to be just meditation, just energy work, just therapy. It's many different things. I also do yoga. I go for walks. I have a service dog. There are so many different tools that I have in my tool belt to use. But the most important tool in all of those is being able to ask questions of my PTSD. If it's telling me I'm a terrible person, should I believe that? Would you agree with that I'm a terrible person? If you know me, you might be quick to answer. If you don't know me, maybe you have a question about it. But the point is, the PTSD doesn't always tell us the truth. It's characterized by the re-experiencing phenomenon, right? So those negative things that come up are often attached to some other type of experience that's embedded in us, right? Known or not known. Because again, something that a lot of people don't understand about PTSD is that PTSD isn't just from military combat or law enforcement work. It can come from car accidents, which is where mine came from. It can come from trauma, it can come from abuse. It can also come from fear for yourself, your own mortal being. But also it can be fear for others. So maybe you are somebody who witnessed something happening to someone else that was devastating or made them lose their life. That can cause PTSD in you as well. So there are lots of different causes, and when you think of all the different types of scenarios that can happen, it's really mind-blowing how many people could be suffering from it and not know it. So with that, it's important to investigate with PTSD. I'm always investigating why I'm thinking the way that I am. Or if my baseline equilibrium that I've created takes a dip, I need to be on that right away. I did an entire video for veterans and spouses about being aware of things at the lowest level, because it's super important to catch the initial on it, that initial tick down, because if you don't catch the initial tick, it goes 5 more ticks and 5 more and 5 more until you've hit the depths of that rabbit hole, and then it's really hard to get yourself out of it, because at that point you're just believing everything that comes up, because one negative thought attaches to another and it just brings in a whole army of negative thoughts. So with meditation, it gives you the opportunity to safely investigate what's happening, safely investigate thoughts, ideas, feelings, emotions, and it's okay to not get an answer right away. One of the methods of meditation is self-inquiry. And self-inquiry allows you to pose a question without demanding an immediate answer, because what happens in meditation isn't necessarily the goal. So with meditation, you do the practice, you work with the brain, you work with the mind and the body and the spirit, and then you go off into your life, and little by little, this training that you've done for these neural pathways begins to show up in, slightly less reactivity, maybe something that typically would get you a little irritated. It's like, that's not so bad. Why did that get me so upset? And then here you have another question. So one question leads to another question, and you stop demanding the answers because eventually they show themselves to you. And, my husband and I talk often about PTSD because we both suffer from it. And, I said to him recently, what makes you think that you don't have enough room in your mind and heart and soul for everything that you need? What makes you think that space is closed up? It's kind of like, I don't know. What makes me think that? Well, it's just a question you never ask yourself. So what are the questions that you've never asked yourself because you've never felt safe enough to ask? And these videos that I create, they're just meant to give you a new perspective. They're not meant to be an end-all be-all in how things are approached. If you're a veteran or in law enforcement, I hope that you are working with a good therapist where you can watch these things and bring back questions and develop your own tool belt. You're not here to suffer. We can have pain, we can have emotions, we can have physical aches and pains in the body without also suffering under the weight of our own judgments. We each have our own path, and it's important to play for your own team. And I do say that to my husband all the time. If I can't play for my own team, how can I expect everyone out there to play for my team? I had to save myself. And that's a really big statement. And it was hard to do because, again, when it comes to PTSD, I always feel like we're our own worst enemy. We're the first to attack ourselves. We don't need anybody else to do it. We're going to do it for ourselves. So it's important to figure out why it is that we're having trouble playing for our own team and to ask some questions of it safely and from a place of not creating further judgment, but just inquiring, almost as if interviewing yourself. And it can be really helpful to do so. I mean, that's where journaling can be a really great tool, although I have to admit I'm not a big fan of journaling. I don't like to write down my negative thoughts. I don't want to know what's in there, which is the opposite of all the questions I'm saying you should ask. But there's, everybody's going to deal with that pushback in themselves, and they're going to deal with that, with that inner critic and that inner warden, because there is an inner warden that tries to take over and tries to tell you how it's going to be. But are you going to take control of your home inside yourself and take charge of it and decide that you want this to be a better place to live because this is the home you live in through your life? Or are you going to let that warden take over and tell you how it's going to be? So again, this is just to give you some perspective. This is not the end all be all. I've lived with PTSD for a long time. I've spent a lot of time with law enforcement and military, a lot of prison guards, as well as a lot of emergency workers. So I've had many of these types of conversations through the years, and many of my best conversations and my best learning happened out at Fort Dix when I volunteered out at the Warrior Transition Unit. The troops out there were the turning point in my perspective. I think we helped each other to learn a lot about this. If you haven't read my story, you can check it out. It's on Amazon, but I talk a lot about the perspectives that I developed from being out at the base and how that was really the place where I had to look at my experiences, and I realized that there was something here to be learned that I could help other people with, and that if I could pull myself through this and learn about it, there was information here that could be shared from the inside out. And that's really what my story is all about, and it's why I do what I do, and it's all in the honor of those troops one of which I just talked to today, which was really nice. The support just continues. And it's all about just gaining perspective and, asking some questions.